So let's actually get moving on this one. I'm going to use the video on just to make you see, and you can see that I'm actually a real person. And this is actually the Microsoft Helsinki office because I'm actually based in Finland as well, and in Helsinki. I've been doing remote work for 6 years already because I report in the Redmond organization. So it's been a pretty interesting few weeks related on this transition. Obviously, for me, this is what I've been doing for 6 years. But then even in Microsoft, a lot of people are struggling because they are so used to go to the office and have a communications between things or people in the office. It's slightly different when you're having communication between a camera and you don't actually know who's behind of the camera or what are they actually doing. But it's fine. Anyway, so today in this next 30 to 40, maybe 45 minutes, let's see how long does it take. I know that it was marked to be 30 minutes. I'm trying to fit it in 30 minutes. If it goes slightly long, I do apologize. It's a really nice topic to cover as well. We're going to talk about how we build Microsoft Teams UX extensibility. And UX extensibility means user interface extensibility using SharePoint Framework. So let's be super clear. This is a development topic. If you're interested on non-development areas and non-development, let's say coding stuff, go to Caruana's session. Caruana is a change management and some sort of adoption session right now. Maybe Vesa Nopanen can actually share what Caruana is talking to. Just making sure that you are aware on what are we covering in this one. SharePoint Framework is our development tooling or SDK development toolkit for SharePoint or Microsoft 365. So we're going to really concentrate on code. We're going to keep it quite high level because this is not intended to be a super deep dive on things, but there might be something interesting stuff for some of the, let's say, old school SharePoint developers as well. Now, quickly explaining who am I. So for those who haven't actually seen me or anywhere, my name is Juvonen. I'm a principal program manager from the SharePoint and OneDrive developer platform team. So SharePoint and OneDrive has a joint organization. It was joined already quite a few years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago. OneDrive was independent at some point, and then we merged SharePoint and OneDrive. And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll merge together with Teams at some point now that Jeff Teeper is actually leading both of those organizations. Maybe that actually does make sense because a lot of our tooling and development experiences, a lot of that stuff is actually starting to overlap so heavily between things. I'm an old SharePoint developer. I'm not that old, but still. I started as a SharePoint developer back in 2006 as a consultant in Microsoft, and then joining Microsoft Redmond organization, the headquarters organization, maybe 6 years ago or something like that. I can't remember. So I've been in Microsoft now for 13 years. But I actually work as the connection between partner ecosystem, open source community. So I'm pretty much up to date on what's actually happening within the world. Plus the fact that I'm based in Finland, not in Redmond, making the things even more complicated. But that also means that maybe I'm slightly more up to date on what's happening. Maybe not, who knows? And anyway, my time zones and working times are pretty strange because the meetings are happening in the evening. Anyway, that's about me. Let's actually concentrate on today's topic. Now, I'm going to use some of the classic slides. Hopefully, I'm going to touch some of the new things here and there. So we're going to quickly recap what is a SharePoint Framework. We're potentially renaming SharePoint Framework at some point because you can actually use SharePoint Framework to target not only SharePoint. You can implement development stuff for Teams or in Office add-ins. So therefore, it's probably going to be renamed. It might be that it's going to be shared framework, so we don't have to, or shared platform framework, so we don't have to change the SPFX term. We'll see. It's a marketing decision. What are we going to call that? But it is modern client-side development tooling. It's basically modern client-side development. Let's recap what that actually means. It means that you are using the same as latest technology trends as in other areas within the internet. So you're using Angular, React, JavaScript, whatever you want, client-side development with TypeScript. We're using almost the latest and greatest on the TypeScript and Node-side. We're always slightly behind, but not too much, few months behind of the latest curve. It is a lightweight web and mobile, so you're able to basically host everything automatically, or everything is adapting automatically to different screen sizes, so which is pretty cool. So you don't actually have to worry about how your customization adapts on the screen size that much. It powers our own experiences, super important thing. So because this is one of those things where this is the first time where in the SharePoint or in the Microsoft 365 area, we as an engineering, we, the people in Redmond who implement the experiences for you, we actually use SharePoint Framework as well. So that means that if you as a partner or a customer are considering that is it worth, are they going to change the SharePoint Framework soon? The answer is no, because we use it to implement our own stuff. So it's pretty safe to actually bet on SharePoint Framework. Well, pretty safe is a bad way of putting that. It is absolutely safe to bet on a SharePoint Framework because we are using that to implement everything what you see in modern SharePoint by ourselves. So really important thing. It is backward compatible. So if you have implemented something in a SharePoint Framework version 1.0, which was released more than 3 years ago, it still works in SharePoint Online. So we guarantee that you don't have to recompile. You don't have to worry about the stuff that is it going to work in the future? The answer is yes. If it's not going to work, then it's a bug and we need to fix that. It supports open source tools and JavaScript web framework, so you can actually build SharePoint Framework extensibility using Angular, Vue.js, Amber. There's a gajillion new frameworks spinning up every single week. Now, in Microsoft, we use React because that was a decision a few years ago, and it was the most suitable decision definitely at the time. And now we're building a lot of our experiences using React. You don't have to use React. You can use Angular as well if you prefer to do so. Now, SharePoint Framework was released 3 years ago, slightly more than 3 years ago. I think it was 23rd of February. So we're kind of a few months on top of the 3 years. And it obviously always takes a while, the stuff to catch. And I really get to people start using things. But then when people actually start using stuff, it really started growing enormously in our side. And I'm not going to actually talk about what are you seeing here, what is the metric, and how do we calculate things, but I can explain maybe the growth in the level that this blue line here in the screen, this is SharePoint add-ins. So how much SharePoint add-ins is used in SharePoint Online worldwide. The green thingy, which is now in here, is how much SharePoint Framework is being used worldwide on a day-to-day basis. Every single line is basically a day in this chart. And this is real data, except that we had a telemetry glitch a while back, which is now fixed. So the latest is pretty high over there. It's 10 times actually more. It's more than 10 times actually more than the SharePoint add-ins being used worldwide. So if you're wondering on, is this something what people are using? Is this something where partners and customers are actually betting on? The answer is yes, it is. Yes, people are using it much more than we were expecting. All of our metrics are just out of this world. It's really interesting to see the growth. I still remember when we crossed the SharePoint add-ins usage worldwide, we were super happy, and that was only a start. But this is quite typical, actually, adoption curve, by the way. Even for open source project, it takes surprisingly long time the stuff to catch on. But as long as you keep on repeating and telling the story and explaining and evolving as well, because we've been having 12 different releases already, people actually are then feeling comfortable, more and more comfortable on betting on that thing, and then they start building stuff, and then we get that level of a growth. Now, these dips here and over there, these are as expected. These are basically holiday season. Well, that's a holiday season. That's a summertime. That's a holiday season, and then we're growing again like too much. That's a telemetry glitch, basically telemetry mistake, which happened. Luckily, we were able to fix that. Now, because of SharePoint Framework has been so tremendously successful worldwide, and people are super excited on building stuff on top of it, then we got a lot of requests in our team to start expanding the ways the SharePoint framework can be used. And that's why already more than a year ago, actually, the Teams tabs support was introduced. I should have actually changed that to be Teams Solutions nowadays. And then pretty recently in January, we released also support for Office add-ins. So you're able to build Outlook add-ins as a preview capability using SharePoint framework. The whole point of this one is that you can actually implement one piece of code, the same piece of code, and we're going to see that in the demo as well. And you can then surface that in multiple different applications. So you can reuse your learnings, your piece of code across the Microsoft 365 rather than re-implementing stuff which, well, where does it have to be now hosted? Oh, this one works in a different way as that one. Oh, what is the single sign-on with this one? And what's that one? And where do I host these things? No, all of that is taken care of. So you don't have to worry about that. So the teams on the team side of the house, the adoption, well, the adoption is always slow, but then when it actually starts growing, like crazy, and we can see the numbers on the team side adoption as well for SharePoint Framework right now. But the main idea here is that really it enables developers to build SharePoint Framework, or maybe it is a shared platform framework-based tab solutions or personal apps, using the same familiar tooling which people be using on SharePoint Framework. You have full access on the Teams context and SDK in the development and in the runtime. So you're able to see what is the tab where I am, who's the person, who's the email, who's the whatever address, you can access that information. The key point why you would be doing this is that hosting, authentication, deployment, API access, all of that is automatic. There's no single sign-on things to worry. There's no API management to worry or authentication. Or where would I host this, my things? No, everything is hosted automatically for you. So you could call this as auto-hosted Teams solutions because that's what SharePoint does behind the scenes. You don't actually see the SharePoint within this screenshot either, but behind the scenes, SharePoint is acting as the hosting platform and then surfacing the data, information, and your solution from the SharePoint side. So even though you wouldn't actually use the SharePoint, it is actually behind the scenes and doing its stuff. In the same way as if you click the Files tab in the Teams, you actually are seeing information and files which are stored in SharePoint. But it's obviously from an end user perspective, it doesn't matter whether things are stored or how does it work, as long as it works, which is an important thing. And it has full support for rich clients. So basic thing is that all of this stuff works in the desktop and in a mobile client. So regardless what clients is in a mobile device, whatever you're using, everything is working seamlessly across the both sides. Now, how do we actually make these things happen? We're going to do a demo on this one as well. But basically, when you're implementing a SharePoint Framework web part, which is no longer a SharePoint Framework web part as such, even though from a code perspective, it is still called a SharePoint Framework web part, but you can actually choose where the web part is being hosted and how is it being exposed. So for a individual web part, you can actually set the supported hosts attribute to say that web part should be visible in the web part picker, and that would mean that it's visible in the SharePoint side of the house. Or you can actually say that, well, this web part should be exposed as a SharePoint full page application, which is one of those things which people don't necessarily know that it's actually being possible to do. What's cool about the full page application is that you can actually render whatever you want. So you can actually own the whole, pretty much almost a full screen, and you can actually render whatever things you want. So your branding can be as, let's say, crazy as whatever the marketing people came up with. Or you can actually define your web part to be hosted, not to be even a web part. It should be actually a Microsoft Teams tab. And that means that it doesn't have to be even exposed in a SharePoint side. It's only exposed as a Teams tab. But still, SharePoint is automatically hosting your solution. So again, you don't have to worry about the Azure application setup, authentication, all of that stuff. No, all taken care of. It's just automatically magic and it works. And now pretty recently, starting from 1.10 version, we also support Teams personal apps. So you're able to actually expose those web parts, which are no longer web parts, as a Teams personal applications in the same way as with any personal application in SharePoint side. Now, there are certain limitations, well, not limitations, there are certain differences. How do we expose the personal apps? Are you actually using the automated way, which we provide in the SharePoint, or do you actually build your manifest manually? I'm going to do a live demo on that one today as well, so you understand the differences. So now, again, quick recap, how the system actually works. So we have an Office 365 SharePoint Online, and within top of that SharePoint Online, so to say, we are then exposing and rendering a web part, which is actually a Microsoft Teams tab. So it's not a web part at all. It doesn't have to be a web part. And whenever the end user is then accessing the tab in the channel or a personal application, we are loading automatically the JavaScript files and assets based on your current tenant app catalog definitions and settings, or alternatively, your JavaScript files can be hosted from a CDN. So definitely also possible. But technically, the important thing to understand is that you do not have to host anything by yourself. You don't have to go to Azure. You don't have to actually create an Azure application or AWS application where your stuff is being hosted. We can host everything for you. To be fair, good point to still understand is that if your application is a complex application and it's, for example, hitting an API in Azure, and then you want to surface LOB data, line of business data, like orders or whatever inside of your tab, sure, your web part might then call in a secured way an Azure web API to get that information. So you might have an Azure part regardless, but the UX layer doesn't have to be hosted by yourself because we host everything for you, and that's actually pretty cool. That's quite nice setup to make things work easily. So let's actually have a look on this one in practice, and then come back on a small recap and discussion on things. And I know I realized that I missed one slide, which I was intended to put on the presentation, but I'll show the stuff in practice when we get to that stage. Now, let me jump to a right browser. It is that one. So let's do a live demo on things. So first of all, obviously in Microsoft Teams, stuff is evolving fast. You can expose your portals. You can do a lot of other stuff. This is, by the way, one way of obviously taking advantage of SharePoint behind of the scenes. And this one, you can see the SharePoint portal exposed as a Contoso portal application in the Teams side. So this is one way of actually exposing data from SharePoint inside of your Microsoft Teams. So you can have multiple tabs as a personal application and push this to be available for every single employee in your company. Quite nice, and that's pretty cool. And again, slightly different scenario as with SharePoint Framework. With SharePoint Framework, it's all about actually then having an application specific or specific application exposed in the Teams. So it is a one application, which is, for example, exposing like a line of business data, application data. So in this case, this data is actually coming from an Azure AD hosted web API. So we're securely surfacing line of business application data inside of the Microsoft Teams. And this is actually the web part. So the web part is not a page in SharePoint. The web part is the whole section in this page. Alternatively, you can absolutely expose your SharePoint Framework-driven solution or build solutions inside of a tab as well. So just an example, let's actually do that. Let's add a tab here. You can set your applications and solution which are built using SharePoint Framework being exposed as a tab, and then we can add them directly to the channel. And they can have a slightly different experience if they're personal applications or are they actually Microsoft Teams tabs. Now, the cool thing again here, just recapping, we don't have, everything is hosted for you. What we did here is that we implemented a SharePoint Framework panel or a solution, and then we deployed that to be available in Teams. And I'll get to back on how we did that and on the code and everything else in a second. The only kind of a small, let's say, nuance difference is that when you configure these things, you actually configure them using this panel on the right side, which kind of exposes that it is a web part. It is a SharePoint hosted application rather than a typical tab, which is hosted in Azure as a SaaS application. So when it goes to settings, we actually expose the settings and configuration in here. What's still pretty cool about that setup is that you can actually then take advantage of a custom controls for your configuration, which is not available for a classic tab configuration options. Well, technically, it might be, but anyway, you can take advantage of the same property controls and configurations as what we have in the SharePoint side. Now, what does this mean in practice? I'm a developer. I want to understand what do I need to do. Now, in SharePoint, let me actually do that. Let me actually open up that one from here. So here is a typical SharePoint solution. I will share pretty soon the assets and location where you can get the information if you're not familiar with the SharePoint Framework. But SharePoint Framework, behind of the scenes, is a TypeScript-based solution. And in this case, this is a solution which has been built using React. So it's a React-based solution to surface your personal emails as a web part, or as a personal application, or as a Teams tab, or as a personal application in Teams. So let's actually close that one. So it is TypeScript, which is then as part of the packaging, it is being transcompiled to JavaScript. So whenever you're running stuff in browser, it's JavaScript, native JavaScript to be executed in any of the browsers, and they understand that natively without any problems. Now, what do we do here? I'm not going to actually modify the code too much, but this is, as an example, this is a simple web part which can be exposed in SharePoint as well. And let's have a look on what this web part actually does in practice, first in SharePoint, and then we're going to modify that to be supported in Teams as well. So let me get in here. Let's go to the perspective as an example, and sample site, which is available. By the way, if you're interested on using this kind of a sample demo content and demo sites, please use SharePoint Lookbook, so lookbook.microsoft.com. You can provision this kind of sample demo content, pre-sales demo content to any tenant in the world, as long as you're a tenant administrator, so pretty convenient. Now, let me actually create a new page here, and let me expose you what are we actually doing with that particular web part, which was the personal web part. So let me create a blank page. There we go. Let's give it a name, Teams Fest. And let's get rid of that extra web part, and let's add in here, and we have something like personal email, and that's the custom web part which I already deployed to my tenant, and it basically what it does is that it shows my latest 5 emails, and if I click a new email, it will actually start the new email process in the Outlook Web Access, or if I click more details on the email, I can actually get redirected to the Outlook on my side, and I can configure how many of the emails actually want to be visible in the page. So pretty convenient. People want to have insights on their inbox in the portal. So quite nice web part. By the way, completely open source, available for you to take advantage anytime you want. Now, this web part, if we want to use this and expose this web part in a slightly differently, let's have a look on those options. Again, if you come from a SharePoint, you might know this already. We actually have on the SharePoint side, we have this full page application option where I can actually expose any, well, the web parts and functionalities which I have designed for this site, I can expose in this full page mode as well. So if I do, there we go. And that one, you can actually see what is a full page mode in SharePoint side. But that's not really what this conference is all about. So this conference is about Teams and extensibility on Teams. And how could we then take this piece of code and expose that as a personal application inside of Teams? What if it would be only more 1 or 2 different settings, and we could actually make magic happen? And that's basically what it is. So let's do that one in practice together. So in my existing code, I will actually open up the code in here. That's the existing code. We're not going to deep dive on the code, not actually that meaningful. We have plenty of documentation and guidance and tutorials available in the internet, and I will show where to get started later on. But as a web part, the web part has a manifest file. Manifest file basically is the one which is saying what is the web part name, the web part name being personal email, what is the description, what is the icon which is visible for end users. And really the key setting here is the supported hosts. So if I want this web part to be exposed as a personal app, I can actually do that really easily. So I can actually just go here and say, hey, I want you to be exposed as a personal app. And that's it. We're good to go. Or if I want that to be exposed as a Teams tab, I'm going to just select Teams tab, save, and we're good to go. Well, obviously, we need to package the code. It's not like SharePoint Online is going to jump on your computer. So let's actually do that. So gulp bundle --ship. I'm basically now what happens behind the scenes, if you're not familiar, the TypeScript is getting transformed to be JavaScript so that on runtime, the browsers don't have to do any additional work, even though on development time, we're using TypeScript. And that's the beauty of the TypeScript. What am I doing wrong? Okay, so let's save that one more time. Let's click that one. Let's do that one. Dun, 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 dun. There's a small typo maybe there, I don't know. I maybe started the processing too early. Well, that's an interesting missing required property description. No, it's not. Description is here. What am I actually doing wrong? One second. We'll get this done. So that's fine. So that's right, manifest. Okay, so let's do it in this way. So actually, let's do that one. That's an interesting exception, which I didn't have actually in earlier. Could be some environmental thing as well. Let's not worry about it too much. So I'm going to recompile that one, say that it's that web part is going to be Teams tab. And that should actually go through without any problems. Dun, dun, dun. Looking good. Webpack is taking time. There we go. And then we're going to execute gulp package solution. That's the ship. And that's going to repackage basically that solution to be done as an SBPKG file. SBPKG file is the solution package type of SharePoint Framework solution. So basically now we have a new version of the solution available to get drag and dropped on the app catalog. Let's actually do that. Let's make sure that stuff is working properly. So now in the app stems in the app catalog, I'm going to just install quickly this solution to my tenant app catalog. And I'm going to replace that. It's going to refresh, double check that everything is fine. Yes, I wanted that get one deployed across the tenant, and we're good to go. And now because we updated this solution to support Microsoft Teams. Let's actually do that. Oh, let's actually get rid of the refreshed status. There we go. We actually said that this application and this web part is also supported by Microsoft Teams. We are lighting up this additional setting in the Files tab, which is Sync to Teams. And what that one actually does, it automatically generates the needed manifest. And you can see on the right side, pretty soon it's going to flash. There we go, successfully synced to Teams solution. So what it actually happens behind the scenes is that on SharePoint side, we automatically generate the manifest file, Teams manifest file, based on these settings which we have in the web part manifest. So we put it in the Teams app catalog. Now, why do we have SharePoint app catalog and tenant app catalog and Teams app tenant catalog? That doesn't make any sense, and I completely agree, and we're working on it. So sooner or later, you'll have a one solution catalog in a tenant where you can then control all of your solutions, but it takes a while to get to that unified catalog model. Now, that's now synced on the Teams side, and that then means that if I go to the Teams side, we pretty soon, it takes a while actually to refresh. If you go into this build for M365 PMP, which is my company name, we can actually then see pretty soon the application to be available to get installed as a tab to an existing tenant. Now, there is a caching here, so it can take up to, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes, which is a slight pity because it has an impact on the demos. So I can't actually make it so fluent transition from a demo side. But as we're waiting that to happen, there's one other thing what I wanted to actually show. Now, I showed already that the Leads application can be a personal app, right? we talked about this one. I briefly showed that there's a personal application. It is a Leads web part, which is an open source web part as well, which is showing example data from the lead management system. And it's a personal application. Now, there is though one small challenge with this personal application implementation, which is that, to be honest, this doesn't actually follow up on the guidance, design guidance of personal applications. What do I mean with that? Well, if you go on the Teams documentation about the personal apps in the guidance, the personal apps are intended to have multiple tabs. So you would have your potential bot conversational tab, your personal tags or whatever is your primary application, a few additional settings, and then a help tab, and then a settings tab. Well, if you don't have a bot, you don't have to have a bot. That's actually also mentioned here that, well, bot isn't actually required, but it's a great way of actually engaging with things. And that's true. It's a great way of doing things. So can we actually do similar kind of things with SharePoint Framework? And right now, the answer is yes, we can. The challenge is actually the fact that when we use the sync to Teams in here, we generate the manifest automatically. And let's see if we can actually already see the application in here. And let's see if we can actually get it. Not yet. Refresh. Is it already there? Is it already there? Is it already there? Not yet. Okay. So we generate this automatically based on the settings of the web part. But what you can also do is that you can create your manifest manually, even though you're using a SharePoint Framework. So what I have here is a SharePoint Framework solution with 3 different web parts. And one of the primary web parts is actually my personal app web part. This is pretty ugly. I didn't actually make them super pretty, so they're easy to follow. We also have a help web part designed for this solution, and we have a settings web part. So basically now I have a solution which is designed to be a personal application in Microsoft Teams, which actually consists from 3 different web parts, which are the 3 different tabs, which are exposed from the personal application. And we cannot actually use the sync to Teams for this one. But what I can do is that I can actually create the needed manifest manually or using the manifest editor, manifest designer in the Microsoft Teams to make this happen. And all of this is obviously documented in our documentation. What are the Teams logon and what are the other settings which I actually need to do for making things happen. But if you can read the manifest settings in here, you can actually already see that I have a personal application built with SharePoint Framework, which will have Contoso updates path, tab. Quick second, I will mute everybody because there's some background noise. It will have a help tab and it will have a settings tab, which all of them are individual web parts. But from an end user perspective, they're being built and exposed using the same application. And how does that look in practice? Let's actually have a look on that. So let's go in here. And did I actually already have it installed? No, I didn't. Let me click the latest. Let me add the latest in. And now, pretty ugly. I didn't make it pretty. I'm going to call out what we're actually seeing here. We can see that that's the latest personal application. It's being exposed on the left navigation. You could potentially pin it. You could actually put it in the, using the app policies, you can put it in the left forest in the left navigation like I've done with the Contoso portal. And we have here multiple different tabs like we should be having based on the guidance for the personal application. And now let me go back in here. We have the Contoso updates, which is actually a one web part. And in the Contoso updates web part, we are automatically eating or getting the user principal of the particular user. And we're using the SDK, Teams SDK, to get access really easily the user principal, and then just outputting that one as a simple output on the rendering. Now, what else do we have here? We have the help tab, which is another web part. It's another web part. It is using now the same style and theming and everything else, because I, again, kept keeping things super simple for a reason. But there's a one web part. It could be more wide. It could be rendered whatever you want, and whatever is the purpose of the web part as well. And then I have the settings web part, because personal applications do not have native configurations and setting option. Based on the Microsoft Teams design guidance, we should also have settings here if there's anything what you need to be configured or need to be configurable for the end user. So I have the settings here, which is again a web part, which could expose the different options, and then you could be able to click and apply, which will then change the behavior of your primary experience. And this way, you basically have a full personal application experience, which is actually being built using SharePoint Framework with 3 different web parts. But it's from an end user perspective, they don't have to know that they're web parts. They don't have to know what's the technical thing. The beauty of, again, this one is that you don't have to host anything. Everything is hosted automatically for you, depending, again, on the solution design. Well, like I said on the intro, if your solution has, let's say, a complex API calls which are being hosted in Azure, yes, you can absolutely securely host and call Azure Web APIs from SharePoint Framework. 100% supported and super easy to do. But this way, the UX is being automatically hosted. So you can concentrate your backend in being hosted in Azure and the UX auto-hosted by SharePoint. And that's actually pretty cool. Let's see if we get our email application available finally in here. Why isn't it available? I don't understand. Let's actually have a look on here. Let me get in here. Let me add a new tab. Is it a caching? It is a caching thing, which I'm not going to actually investigate right now. Why didn't it actually get it visible in here? But setting of the web parts of the visible, like for example, for the personal web parts, we can definitely, just like I said, there's 2 ways of actually adding the web parts to be visible in Microsoft Teams. We can configure them to be visible based on the supported hosts, and then use the sync to Teams capability for creating the manifest. In my case, this seems to be something strange on the setup, which I need to look into, but that works by default automatically. And from here, you could actually do the personal application as well by selecting the Teams personal app. But if you want to have more control, if you want to combine your SharePoint Framework implemented tabs and personal application experiences with bots and all of that stuff, then you would actually create everything manually. So you would be actually adding your supported host to be 0. But then you create your manifest manually, and all of this is documented really well, so you can actually combine your SPFX and bots and all of the other experiences to a single solution, which is then installable for end users. That's pretty much all what we're going to do related on these experiences. So SPFX, pretty awesome from a UX layer. SharePoint Framework is really around the UX layer capabilities. And then if you're using bots or if you're using a web API, then you're still using Azure hosting those things as well. So let's go to quickly on the slides because we're closing up as well. So that was really around building Microsoft Teams tabs and personal applications with SharePoint Framework. I will actually jump on the assets and resources as a final thing because I forgot about adding that entry on the slide. So let me do that after a few slides. One of the questions what we're now getting also all the time is, hey, so what's with the SharePoint Framework and Yo Teams? So we don't have a Yo Teams, which can be used to auto-generate bots and SaaS-based applications, and then SharePoint Framework can be used also to be created Teams tabs and personal applications. What with this balance? And the balance is pretty much there that if you have an existing web application, if you have existing implemented design, which you want to expose in Teams as a tab or a personal application, then the Yo Teams is absolutely designed for that. If you want to create bots, absolutely. Now, the SharePoint Framework part of the story is that you can use SharePoint Framework, especially for enterprise applications and maybe in-house applications. Well, why not ISV applications as well, what we're seeing more and more as well, to implement your experiences, and then you're able to expose the same experience in multiple different locations. So you don't have to expose and think about the difference of SharePoint and let's say SharePoint and Teams and Office add-ins, but it's the same tooling, same implementation style. But both of these definitely have their, let's say, options. And there's a additional clarity and additional tooling also coming for Microsoft Teams developers pretty soon as well, related on templating and templates and starting points as well. But these are complementing. They're not really competing. It's not that because we have the SharePoint Framework tabs experience, it's not going to take away the option that you want to surface your Azure-based application. No, that's still completely 100% viable solution in the future as well. So quickly, just closing in here at the road ahead, what are we working for? SharePoint Framework support in the store is in the development. It's coming pretty soon. Unified toolchain for Microsoft 365 workloads is coming as well. That's basically using the same tooling and surfacing that in every single location. Native support for Fluid Framework, if you're familiar, what is a Fluid Framework? Faster inner dev loop, so you will see more and more versions coming out all the time, more extensions for SharePoint. And then as an example, for team side of the house, SharePoint Framework action commands for message extensions in Microsoft Teams. And this is really around the fact that action commands in message extensions can have a UI as well. So what about implementing those as web parts? Well, they're not web parts in that case, but still web part. So that will be available sooner or later. So we're working on that one. There's no ETA on the following version right now, just realities of the world right now. It's really, really hard to predict the availability of the resources because, well, everybody's working remotely at home and that has an impact on productivity as well. But before I actually go to the final slide, just to briefly pinpointing where you can get some more information. So if you're looking into getting started on SPFX, the address is quite easy. SharePoint Framework, AKMS, SPFX, going there. We have a pretty nice set of tutorials. If you go to the web parts, getting started, we talked about how to get started on building your first web parts. And then in the tutorials, we actually go more and deeply on the web parts being used or building a Microsoft Teams tab using SharePoint Framework one step at a time as an experience. There's plenty of actually additional documentations in here as well. So if we have a look on hosting Microsoft Teams tabs in SharePoint or building manifest manually. Where do I actually have it? Yes, creating Microsoft Teams manifest manually for web part and deploying that to Teams. So we're talking about all of this stuff in the documentation, all available in here. Also, we have our Microsoft 365 and SharePoint PMP community YouTube channel now with 15,000 subscribers, which is pretty cool. Where, as an example, right now the welcome page is promoting building Microsoft Teams tabs personal apps using SharePoint Framework as the default video. PMP Weekly is getting here released, and pretty much every single day there's a new videos coming up on this channel related on these topics across the Microsoft 365. So probably want to have a look on that one. But that's all what I'm going to cover today. 30 minutes or 35 minutes or 45 minutes is actually super hard, super interesting topics. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you everybody for being part of the Teams Fest event today. Really cool setup. Thank you for Team Fest organizers for inviting us and making this thing happen as well. Please rate the session. So please give us a feedback as well. If there's something which we would have wanted to see more detailed, please let us know because that's always super useful for us for the future. But that's all what we're going to do here. Thank you, everybody.